Vatican terror plot. There's evidence terrorists planned 5 years ago to attack the Holy See. Suffering remembered. Armenia marks 100 years since the start of a genocide. To his eternal home, we revisit Chicago's beautiful send-off for Cardinal Francis George. And hope from darkness. Oklahoma City's Archbishop talks about a spirit of caring and kindness as fruits of tragedy. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, April 24th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. Terrorists suspected in a massive deadly bombing in Pakistan may have also planned an attack against the Vatican in 2010. Catherine Szeltner reports from the White House tonight. Catherine?
Yes, Brian. Italian prosecutors revealed the possible terrorism plot today. And while that attack on the Vatican was obviously never carried out, it is raising questions over papal security. Italian police expect to arrest 18 people with links to al-Qaeda in a major anti-terrorism operation. They're suspects in a 2009 Pakistani market massacre, in supporting Osama bin Laden, and now wiretaps expose an alleged plan to attack the Vatican in 2010.
The location of the attack could have been the Vatican.
The plan involved 2 suicide bombers at the Vatican, but when the extremists got word police were searching for them, it was foiled. At the time, Muslim leaders were upset with Pope Benedict after he quoted a Byzantine emperor who characterized some of Muhammad's teachings as evil and inhumane. In a released statement today, the Vatican spokesperson says, "From what it appears, this concerns a hypothesis that dates from 2010, which didn't occur. It has therefore no relevance today and no reason for particular concern." The Vatican downplaying the terrorism threat. As recently as February, ISIS terrorists gave a very direct warning. In the same video where they beheaded 21 Coptic Christians, the terrorists say, "We will conquer Rome." Here at the White House, the administration faces scrutiny over U.S. counterterrorism. It was announced yesterday American drone strikes killed 2 hostages while targeting al-Qaeda. Brian?
Catherine Szeltner at the White House, thank you. Dr. Paul Marshall is with us from the Hudson Institute Center for Religious Freedom. Dr. Marshall, as terror groups ramp up their persecution of Christians, why are they targeting Christians?
For them, it's a religious duty. That they believe that they should rule over Christians. Christians should accept that rule and pay an extra tax, or flee or be killed. So, that's the choice they're offering them. They regard this as sort of true Islamic doctrine. So Christians and other small religious minorities, Yazidis and others, are their basic targets.
So ISIS has really ramped this brutality up with some of these very graphic videos that they've produced. Do you think groups like Al-Shabaab and Boko Haram may be becoming more brutal, sort of competing with them?
I think they may well be in competition. They've always been brutal, but say for Al-Shabaab, the attack on the Christians in the university in Uganda, that's a new level of violence. So yeah, I think there's competition to show we're as good or as evil as they are.
So as you track persecution of Christians worldwide, what are your main concerns going forward?
Well, there's persecution of Christians in China and other places, but where it's really increasing now and is most violent and most brutal is in the Middle East, including Pakistan in that, and then probably we'd add Nigeria. So the worry there is that the Christian communities will be killed or driven out of there. There may be a couple left, but they'll be like what happened with the Jews. I mean, there used to be hundreds of thousands of Jews in Baghdad. It's now down to about 3. I think there are 11 Jews left in Egypt. We might look at a Christian situation like that in the Middle East.
Isn't that the objective of these terror groups? They want them
They
out.
have a slogan, first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. That's first the Jews, then the Christians.
What should America be doing?
We need to pay much more attention to it. We're not referring to it in the media, and our government is much too silent on these matters. One thing we need to do is to get relief in there. Most of the relief, say, going to the Christians in northern Iraq is private. There's very little governmental work going on in there. So we need to have major efforts in providing relief. I also think we need to arm our allies there, particularly the Kurds, who their weapons are not nearly as good as the ISIS people they're fighting. So I think military aid, and I would continue with the air campaign we're going.
All right, Dr. Paul Marshall with the Hudson Institute Center for Religious Freedom. We appreciate your insight. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Brian.
Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Italy wants more information from the U.S. about how an Italian aid worker was killed in a drone strike on the Afghan-Pakistan border. President Obama revealed Thursday that the Italian and an American, both held hostage by al-Qaeda, were inadvertently killed in January. Italy's foreign minister says his country takes note of Obama's transparency in assuming responsibility for the deaths, but he says Italy wants to know more about what actually happened. The Paris prosecutor's office says a formal terror investigation has been opened now after the arrest of a computer science student this week. Authorities believe the 24-year-old planned an attack on a church. He's also suspected in the shooting death of a woman. Prosecutors say the suspect's DNA linked him to the woman found dead on Sunday. He was arrested hours later after apparently accidentally shooting himself and calling an ambulance. Police say his car and apartment contained an arsenal of weapons, and they believe he had accomplices. Armenians mark a somber anniversary today. A memorial service marks 100 years since the start of a genocide by Ottoman Turks that killed 1.5 million Armenians. The presidents of France and Russia joined others in commemorating the day when the first 250 Armenians were rounded up. Turkey recently recalled its ambassador to the Vatican after Pope Francis referred to the killings as the first genocide of the 20th century. Chicago was his home. He grew up there and returned to shepherd the Windy City's more than 2 million Catholics. But Cardinal Francis George knew well that any earthly home is temporary. This week, Chicago gave him a grand send-off to eternal life. He rests in Holy Name Cathedral one last time. His brother priests, bishops, and cardinals knew him intimately.
For me, it's just like, this is someone I love dearly and I trust to the Lord.
He'll certainly be fondly remembered and sorely missed.
Had a great sense of humor, which would lighten occasions, that came very serious.
His successor, Archbishop Blaise Supich, carries on his ministry.
Accept, O Lord, we pray, the sacrificial gifts we offer for the soul of your servant, Cardinal Francis George.
And those whose lives he touched carry on his legacy.
I'm a nurse, and he used to always come to the hospital where I work to see the patients, and I thought that was very beautiful of him.
We remember the 168 people, men, women, and children who died in the Oklahoma City federal bombing 20 years ago this week. May they rest in peace. We're blessed to have Archbishop Paul Coakley from Oklahoma City joining us. Your Excellency, you spoke at the memorial where thousands attended, remembering all those who died, and you called that beautiful memorial holy ground. How so?
It's holy ground, I think, because of what happened there. A terrible tragedy, of course, but the lives of 168 innocent men and women and several unborn children besides were lost there. So I think just by the sacredness of human life so tragically ended there has sanctified the place, and the remembrance of the terrible events continues to sanctify it in the minds and hearts of so many people.
What good have you seen come out of this tragedy 20 years ago in the people of your city, your diocese?
Well, it certainly drew us together as a community at a very dark hour, a very difficult time. It brought out the best in so many, many people. We are a caring people. We are a generous people. We are a people who like to pitch in and help. And that was never so beautifully demonstrated as it was that day and in the days, weeks, and months following. The city is experiencing a renaissance during these years subsequent to the bombing as well.
You talked about Oklahoma City now as a beacon of hope. What do you hope we can all learn from this?
I think that we can all learn something about the importance of community in such difficult times, people coming together to support one another, times of difficulty, loss, tragedy, drawing upon the resources of our faith. Oklahomans are a faith-filled people. We Catholics are a very small percentage of the population here, but by and large, Oklahomans believe, and they really drew upon the resources of a deep, abiding faith to pull us through those difficult times. I think recalling the importance of faith, not only in private life, but in public life, and the public impact of living our faith can be a beacon of hope for all of us.
Well, be assured of our prayers as you continue to heal from that tragedy 20 years ago, and thank you for joining us, Archbishop Paul Coakley. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
And hope, healing, and reconciliation, three of the gifts emerging from that terrible tragedy. Tonight, Angela Buckelew revisits a story of forgiveness leading to peace 2 decades later.
We were extremely close. I spoiled her a lot. And if she were alive today, I'd still be spoiling her. I know that.
Julie Marie Welch would have been 43 years old today. A devout cradle Catholic, Julie went to Catholic high school and college.
She was killed in the Oklahoma City bombing, April 19th, 1995, which was 11 months after graduating from Marquette.
This is the Oklahoma City National Memorial, where the Alfred P. Murrow Federal Building once stood. Julie worked as a Spanish interpreter at the Social Security office there. In a field of 168 empty chairs, one is inscribed with Julie's name. Bud turned to alcohol and anger to quell his pain, and neither worked.
The first month after her death, I didn't want a trial for them. I simply wanted the bastards fried. That was my feeling toward them. This is coming from a person, all my life I had always opposed the death penalty. I had never truly been tested, and I was tested then.
It took a year, but Julie's dad, Bud, says he eventually realized the self-medicating would kill him physically, and that pursuing the death penalty would kill him spiritually. Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols were tried and convicted. Nichols will spend the rest of his life behind bars, while McVeigh received the death penalty and was executed in 2001.
We took Tim McVeigh from his cage and we killed him. And there was nothing about that process that brought me any peace. I felt re-victimized when that happened.
Bud says Julie would have absolutely agreed with his stance against the death penalty, that she would not have wanted Timothy McVeigh or Terry Nichols executed. An activist, Julie protested against the death penalty in high school and college. Before he was executed, Timothy McVeigh got word of a special gift that Bud gave to him and perhaps to himself that set Bud free. Are you telling me you've forgiven Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols?
I have. It took a long time to do it, but I've forgiven them for the act that they did. When your children die, you bury them in your heart. And it simply never goes away. That does not mean that you can't forgive.
Not to say Bud doesn't miss Julie. He has every day for the last 20 years and will for the rest of his life. But for Bud, with forgiveness, he's able to live it in peace. In Oklahoma City, Angela Buckelew, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Angela. Tomorrow's March for Marriage here in D.C. is being called the most critical march ever by its organizers. They say it's the last best opportunity to reach the Supreme Court before a critical decision. These are pictures from last year's march. The High Court will review federal judges' orders across the country redefining marriage at the state level. Many voters and legislators support preserving marriage as the union of one man and one woman. March for Marriage organizer Brian Brown says the message must be delivered in love in the face of resistance.
in this culture right now, if you stand up and proclaim the truth in love, you'll still be labeled with discrimination and hate. And it's not true, but that shouldn't be something that silences us.
Marchers will gather on the National Mall at midday on Saturday. After a rally, they will process to the Supreme Court, following a route similar to January's March for Life. Up next, can a little boy end a world war to bring his dad home? A new faith-based movie is now in theaters. And we remember the beginning of Benedict XVI's papacy 10 years ago today. Let's look at a passage from tomorrow's Gospel for the Feast of St. Mark the Evangelist, from Mark 16, verse 15. Jesus appeared to the 11 and said to them, "Go into the whole world and proclaim the gospel to every creature." Thanks for joining us for EWTN News Nightly on this Friday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. It's a fine line. How much freedom do you give your kids, and at what age? Recently, 2 Maryland children, ages 10 and 6, were picked up and held by police for walking 3 blocks home from a park. Now, their parents self-identify as free-range parents and try to teach their kids independence. Melissa Braunstein is with us tonight, a contributor to The Federalist, a web magazine focused on culture, politics, and religion. I read your article about this, Melissa. I assume you are not a free-range parent.
No.
But I doubt that you're a helicopter parent either.
No.
What's the difference there?
A free-range parent says that it's important to teach your kids self-reliance and independence and will let them wander off and teach themselves some things. And a helicopter parent is very big on hovering and making sure that you're with your children at all times and keeping a very close eye on them, and you're more likely to have structured play and schedule everything in their day.
Well, nobody wants to tell them how to parent.
Right.
But children need safeguards for protection. What's the balance that we have to strike here?
I would say that the balance falls in the safety zone, that it's more an issue of when we're looking at kids where there's real abuse or neglect, that's where I would ask authorities to step in. And in other cases, I would say that we really need to be leaving these decisions to the parents.
So I think in this case, someone called the police anonymously. And don't police have the obligation to respond if they get a call?
Yes, I think legally police are required to respond if they get a call like this.
So it's a question of how far they take it. In this case, the children were held for quite a while. They were turned over, I believe, to Children's Services briefly.
Yes.
Is this a proper use of Children's Services? Do you think it was overkill?
I think it was overkill. I would say I didn't like that the police, it sounded like, lied to the kids and had them sit in the police car for 3 hours and then didn't inform the parents, even though the kids made it clear they knew where they lived and how to reach their parents. And as far as being overkill, yes, it sounded like this was overkill. These children were not in distress. I would have said once the police saw that they weren't in distress, they should have returned them to their parents.
So if a concerned neighbor sees some kids without parents and they're genuinely concerned and really want to help, what would be the best way to respond to that?
If I were in that situation, I would approach the children and say, where are your parents and do they know where you are? Mm-hmm. If the answer is yes, I think your obligation as a concerned neighbor is finished.
But children aren't supposed to talk to strangers.
That is true. But I think the free-range parents are more comfortable with that. So, but I think the answer is if you're going to get involved and you don't want to involve the police, I think the safer middle step, the middle ground would be to just speak directly to the children.
You mentioned earlier no one wants to be told how to parent. Do you think there's a right way and a wrong way to raise children?
No, I think parenting is very personal and that every parent and every child is different. So it's the ultimate example of things needing to be taken on a case-by-case basis. But I think one thing on is there a right way, I would say I always err on the side of not interfering with other people's parenting unless there's obvious abuse or neglect. I think then someone could feel compelled to step in.
Yeah, I always say love your children and take care of them. That's the only right way. How you do that really is a matter of your own choice.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's a sticky issue, and it's one that I know a lot of people are talking about, and we appreciate your perspective on that. Melissa Braunstein with The Federalist. Thanks for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, a movie from the people who gave us Bella opens in theaters today. We talked recently with the director of this story of faith. Alejandro Monteverdi's a film director. You remember Bella. It took first prize at the Toronto International Film Festival. Alejandro, your new movie is called Little Boy. It's coming out in April, and faith and fatherhood are themes. Is that personal to you?
Yes, yes. You know, I'm being blessed with the best father. My dad, my relation, I will do anything for my father. So that's pretty much the heart of the film. It's about a son that is willing to believe in the impossible, to do whatever it takes to bring his father back from World War II. And you need the innocence of a child to believe that everything is possible.
You have 3 of your own children. Do you see that innocence in them?
Yes, and it's, you know, it's like one of the biggest blessings to come home and to be welcome. It's almost like an injection of
Daddy.
Love, yeah.
So the early conversations when you were putting this concept together, you worked closely with Mark Burnett, Roma Downey, other fellow Christians. What were some of those early conversations about?
Well, I showed him the film and we decided to kind of join forces to take this dream into the big screen. And, you know, Mark and Roma have been nothing but a blessing to this whole project and the journey.
From the trailer, it looks like a family film, yet it's about war. What is the message about war that you're trying from it?
Well, you know, war, in many ways, most of the films, or most of when we talk about war, we think about the people on the battlefield. And this movie explores a little bit more how it affects the families. And the movie, it's really about the home front, about the ones left behind, about the wives and the children, and all this battle that is going on for the loved ones that are in the battlefield. So it explores the love of the son, little boy, who it's willing to do whatever it takes to bring his father back from World War II. So you have, you know, the smallest kid in town trying to, in a way, end the greatest war of our times, which is World War II.
It was a huge war, and it affected so many. We talk about the numbers of people who died or were maimed in that war, and yet when you bring in the families to that, that just completely opens it up. So it is a family movie.
It is a family movie. It's a movie for everybody, but, you know, it's a movie that will, you know, that explores a lot of different themes. One being war, but also the theme about how to handle pain in a moment of tragedy. How do we use our faith? And it explores from a very objective point of view. You know, I don't like to impose a theme, I like to propose a theme. So we explore, you know, the power of faith through the eyes of a little boy.
Alejandro Monteverde, the director of Little Boy, now playing in theaters across the country. Well, 10 years ago today, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger was formally installed as Pope Benedict XVI. During his installation mass, he said that as the Holy Father, he would listen to the will of God to guide his leadership of the Church. Benedict resigned in early 2013, saying he wished to serve the Church in a life dedicated to prayer. Now he still lives in the Vatican. Just last week, celebrated his 88th birthday with his brother and friends from Bavaria. Well, until Monday, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Finally tonight, video journalist Mark Irons just returned from Chicago, where he captured the city's goodbye to a spiritual servant leader, Cardinal Francis George.
Remember how he would always just be laughing and smiling all the time.
He was loved by everyone.
I wanted to pay my respects to the Cardinal.
He was the people's cardinal.
He had like a really big impact on the city of Chicago, and without him we wouldn't be like where we are today with our churches and our Catholic schools.
I walk around here, and he would always give me his blessing. Just saying goodbye to a great man.
And I can just like imagine him being with Mary and all the saints. That just makes me really happy.